And now I'm broadcasting.
Good morning to those who are joining us. I'm just going to let more people come in before we actually formally start, but welcome and it's good to see you all. Okay, I think we'll make a start. People are still joining, but it's a couple of minutes past 10 now. So I think if we make a start and then others will join us in due course. So welcome to all of you who've joined us this morning. It's great to see so many of you. My name is Philippa Childs and I'm the head of Bectu, and I'll introduce our panelists to you in a little while. Bectu have been holding a number of webinars throughout the COVID-19 crisis, and this is the latest, and I'm really, it's probably long overdue, to be honest, because we all know that the stresses and strains that people have been facing across the industry, that there are high levels of mental health problems in normal times, and we're certainly not in normal times at the moment. So so many thousands of our members have been in a situation where, firstly, that they were unsure whether they were going to get any financial support during lockdown, then hopeful that they might get some support during lockdown, and then many have come to the conclusion that actually they've been left behind by the government. And whilst you know, we're still obviously campaigning around that issue, we know that I think it's 102 days now since lockdown, and many of you are still not receiving any support. So I'm sure that well, everyone, whether they've got financial support or not, is probably feeling the stress of that, the lockdown itself. And I'm sure that I absolutely know that having no income adds to that 100-fold. So hopefully you will find today useful and interesting, and we will give you some ideas of, if you need support, where you might be able to go further on in the discussion. And I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Alex Pumfrey, who's the Chief Executive of the Film and TV charity, who the charity have done some fantastic work during this period, finding out, you know, where the gaps are and trying to fill them with some sort of support, grant support, although recognising that Alex and her team have had a finite pot, and have had to raise some money through the broadcasters. Also joined by Adeel Amini, who is a freelance TV producer and the founder of mental health group TV Mindset. We've been working with Adeel and other groups who work in unscripted TV to build a new branch within Bectu, the unscripted TV branch. And if any of you are interested in joining that branch, then contact us or contact Adeel about it. He'll talk more about that later. And I'm also joined by Peter McKintosh, who's a representative of a fantastic new network that has sprung up in the last couple of weeks, Freelancers Make Theatre Work, and he is a set and costume designer in theatre. And Peter will talk about the experience of their members and why the network came about and what they hope to do in the future, recognising, I think, that it's a bit of a movable feast at the moment, isn't it, Peter? Yeah, great. So I'm first going to hand over to Alex Pumfrey, who is going to talk a little bit about the research that they've, at the Film and TV charity, have done, well, actually prior to the lockdown, but also to recognise that what's needed as a result of the trauma that people have been through over the last 3 months. So Alex, over to you. And I think you've got a slide that we need to share.
I do, just one. If that can be brought up, that would be helpful. Whoever's in charge. Thank you. And thank you, Philippa. Morning, everyone. It's always a bit strange on these calls when you can't see the people you're talking to. So it's nice to not see you, but do know that you're there. I think I was going to start off just by putting where we are today in some sort of context, which is that we know that the industry had higher incidence of mental health problems, as Philippa says, really even before all of the difficult events of recent months started. And we did some research almost exactly actually this time last year, something called the Looking Glass survey. We had nearly 10,000 people across the industry respond to it. And whereas we know that 65% of the UK population have experienced mental health problems, that's a statistic from the Mental Health Foundation. When we asked that same question within the industry, in film and TV where we work, we found that 87%, nearly 9 in 10 people had experienced mental health problems. So very significantly higher. And I feel as though crisis is becoming an increasingly devalued term in the current times, but when we had that finding, which that piece of work was done in conjunction with the University of Lancaster and the White Foundation, and they themselves said that felt to them like a mental health crisis. And we've done some benchmarking of that figure, and we know that it's, you know, it's almost as high, for example, as the emergency services, which is astonishing because, you know, clearly paramedics and nurses and doctors are dealing with you know, very traumatic situations day in, day out. And we looked at what was really important with us with that research was to look at why that was, so that we can begin the work that we're doing now to address the underlying causes. And I often say that this isn't about the fruit bowls. This is about really tackling the things that are going on within our industry that are creating those really poor mental health outcomes for people. And I think actually one of the best ways of summing it up are the words that occurred most often when people talked about how they felt working, and those were disposable and expendable, which obviously signify just how little people feel valued working within the industry. So we've got a programme of work that we started earlier in the year, and we've been adapting, and I won't go into it in detail, we can come back to it later on perhaps, about the work we're doing in collaboration with the whole of industry to tackle some, you know, really big issues around bullying and bad behaviour. We're looking at some work around racism as well now. We have some work to look at how we can make productions more people-centred, and about how we can provide some more support to people. And that was what we were doing even before COVID started. And then obviously lockdown began on the 24th of March. And there's a great deal of evidence now in the academic sphere that shows how anxiety and depression spiked. And literally on the day of the 24th of March, when Boris Johnson announced the lockdown, it more than doubled. The national figures for anxiety and depression more than doubled. And it came down a bit after that, but it remained about 40% higher than average. And that's still pretty much where we are today. It's been some tailing off. And within our industry, that meant that a lot of production stopped, you know, literally overnight. Cinemas closed, festivals were cancelled, and I won't need to tell those of you on the call what that's meant in terms of the vast majority of particularly freelancers within our industry not working. And that's been a real struggle for many of you. clearly financial well-being is a major part of one's overall physical and mental well-being as well. And that's been a really tough time. When we did a quick survey, and I know Bectu's done its own surveys as well, at the very end of March, beginning of April, we found that half the people who responded said that they were going to struggle to meet basic living costs over the next 3 months. And then that's been exacerbated, as Philippa has alluded to, by the fact that the structure of the government support has not been well suited to our industry and the way we work within our industry. And our estimate is still that probably around 2/3 to 3/4 of people have fallen through the cracks of that government support. And I do want to thank and applaud Bectu for the work that it's been doing, lobbying so heavily on that side of things, whilst we at the charity have been providing the support that we can, whilst recognising that we can't plug the gap created by that lack of government support. So we ran an emergency relief fund in April, and we're looking to see if there's more funding that we can run in the coming weeks and months. It, as Philippa says, requires us to fundraise to be able to do that. And I'll talk a bit more about the other support we can provide in a moment as well. And then obviously what's come on top of all of that in recent weeks has been the death of George Floyd and the resurgence of Black Lives Matter. And particularly for our Black colleagues across the industry, we know that daily racism can be what's called a chronic stressor. That's just something that sort of it can exist with you all the time. But that these events, these kind of flashpoint events, have for a lot of people tipped that into a sort of racial trauma response. And so, you know, even before this, we were talking about, and I say this with great care because it's not a term to use lightly, but a kind of collective trauma response from the workforce because of all those things that it suffered in recent months. But also know that particularly for Black colleagues with events of you know, everything that's been going on in recent weeks, that can be, you know, greatly amplified. And for those of you that saw the wonderful speech that Clara Amfo, the radio and DJ, gave the day after she took a day off work because she said she couldn't cope with going back to work after the weekend after George Floyd's death. So these are, you know, these are accumulating factors. They, you know, they make life very difficult. We are worried about our physical well-being in the midst of a pandemic and keeping physically well. We are worried about our financial well-being. Our social well-being has been massively constrained by isolation and lockdown. And, you know, all of those things together have a big impact on our mental well-being. I think there's, you know, two things I want to say. One is that you're not alone. We are a brilliant creative community within the industry. There's nearly 200,000 people that work in film and TV. There's 100,000 freelancers. There are, you know, there will be a lot of people who are in the same boat as you and feeling the same way as you. And secondly, know that there is support available. So that's what the charity is here for. Our support line, and I'll try and make sure it's in the numbers in the chat. It's 0800 054 0000. It's available 24/7. It's completely independent. It's completely confidential. If you've just had, you know, a tough day and want to talk it through with someone and someone different, someone neutral, then you can call up the folks on the support line. They're colleagues of ours based in Wales. They are brilliant at providing a listening ear. There doesn't have to be a reason for the call or a question. It can just be genuinely to be a listening ear and to talk something through. They also, though, can give access to other services that we provide. We've got online counselling. We've now got video therapy services available. We've got bereavement counselling, online CBT courses. And the other thing I just wanted to point to that we launched a few weeks ago in Mental Health Awareness Week was a service called Big White Wall, which is a really brilliant, and again, I'll try and get the link up in the chat if I'm clever enough to do that, which is a really brilliant online peer-supported mental health community. And quite often it's used by companies for their workforces, but we've basically done a deal with Big White Wall that means that anyone working within the industry can use this service. It's moderated. It's the only online mental health platform that's Care Quality Commission accredited, so it is clinically moderated, and there are people there to support you. But it really is a fantastic resource to have available to you, particularly at the current time. And then the other thing I want to mention is just the range of, and I'm sure many of you will know this already, the range of resources that are out there, the sessions that Bectu have been running. There's a lot of stuff going on with screen skills, TV mindset, you know, there's hunt around. I think there's some great conversations going on. And actually one of the things that I think is heartening through this whole process is both the way in which people from the industry have pulled together, but also the way in which I think everyone in different ways is trying to help their colleagues around the sector through this current time. So, you know, please, I know it's an incredible, difficult time, but please know that there are people in the same position who want to be able to support you, and there is a lot of support out there for you if you need it. I think I'll leave it there, Philippa.
Thank you very much, Alex. I'm sure we'll have a more opportunity to talk to you later on in this session about sort of future work, but thank you very much for that. I'm now going to turn to Peter McKintosh from Freelancers Make Theatre Work. He's going to talk to us about the experience of people working in theatre, which has obviously currently the added dimension, and I should mention live events as well, because there's been a very widely publicised letter that's gone into Oliver Dowden this morning about the music industry too. And I think it's fair to say that the sort of lack of a time frame for people to work towards in theatre and live events is an added stressor right now. And I've heard lots of people say, if only, you know, if only we had a date that then we can plan towards, you know, what we need to do in order to be able to open even under very, you know, minimal or difficult circumstances. But yeah, so Peter, you're welcome, and it'll be good to hear from you. And please do tell people more about Freelancers Make Theatre Work, because people have been asking how to contact you and how to sign up.
I just want to answer your thing to a lack of time frame first, which I think is, it suddenly dawned on me last night that actually it's also a lack of understanding. I think there's a kind of expectation that even if the government or whoever says, okay, theatres can open, you know, on the 1st of January or the 1st of April next year or whatever, that the assumption is that you can just, you know, turn a key and open the door and everything will just run like normal. But it's months and months and months of work to get people back up to, you know, performance level, to get sets built, to get, you know, all the things that have been left in the theatres that have since been cancelled. There's a whole transportation network of stuff. It's a minefield of organisational things that nobody's even remotely thought about because there is no time frame. So that's just a sort of overview of, I just don't think anybody has really thought about, I mean, it's very clear that nobody's even looked into any of these things in any detail at all. Freelancers Make Theatre Work, there's not even a quick way of saying that. So it's a month old, I think, tomorrow, which is kind of amazing. We met, we're a collective of freelance theatre practitioners and volunteers, all volunteers. I mean, so much so that we've had a few emails of people saying, how do we give you money? And we still don't even have a way to accept money. It would have been so busy. So, and we came together. It was an idea of Vicky Mortimer, who's a set and costume designer. And it was her idea was, we'd all heard. So actually that's not true. I'm not sure we all had. She's connected to the National Theatre. So she was in a lot of those big David Land Zoom and Rufus Norris's Zooms, all these Zooms that were going on, and was endlessly hearing that people weren't getting any information at all. And when I found out about this, which was 11 weeks into the lockdown, and it wasn't even about what this was going to be. It was just a conversation with a friend of mine who's an artistic director, who said, oh, these things are happening, there are conversations happening. And I thought, well, I mean, I haven't heard anything at all, not one single thing about the industry I worked in for 25 years in those 11 weeks. No contact from anybody about what might be happening at all. And so I ended up in a group Zoom for one of the theatres I work for. And they said that Vicky had had this idea, and what they were trying to do is get representatives of all the London theatres in, and I have to look this up because I never remember the London Theatre Consortium. So I think that's any theatre that might be subsidised, I think. A representative in a group to pool ideas and see what could be done, or what, you know, how to address the things people are beginning to hear. Freelancers, exterior of buildings, so not connected to buildings. So even though they've been not even appointed really, everything happened so quickly that we all just ended up in a Zoom, sometimes because we'd had a conversation with somebody, or sometimes somebody from a theatre said, would you mind going to this Zoom on Friday morning and just reporting back, see what it's like, see what the conversation is. So it was, I mean, incredibly, you know, by the time we all got to that Friday morning, we were all, you know, really curious, and but also we all had our own individual experiences of what 11 weeks of lockdown had been without doing the thing that you are skilled to do. All different things, but people, as I say, people from all over London in that first one. But what became increasingly clear, and again, this all happened so quickly, was that, you know, when you look at a Zoom and you kind of go, okay, well, you know, what are we missing here? We're missing representation from, you know, we don't really want to be a London thing. And anyway, there's the Fuel Task Force, which is representing theatres. So we can be an independent group that just, and not that they're not independent, it's just that this was something that happened very quickly, and we realized that we needed, you know, if we were going to reach all the people we needed to reach Northern Ireland, and that's still ongoing. We needed to reach Scotland. We already had somebody from Wales. We need some disability representative, and just, you know, and then beyond that. So every single week now we have new people coming, but we are, you know, we are only a month old, and we are trying to keep up and catch up and be as across the board as we can, while still being volunteers, and putting together what, so those that don't know, what we ended up deciding was that what we really needed was a website, because the big the thing that we kept hearing was, we don't know, we're not hearing anything, was to put together the most comprehensive website of all the information we could possibly find: help information, government information, grants information, news, just how to get hold of theatres, stuff like that, all in one place. So you could go and then we had 3 actions to start I mean, literally hours before we launched the website, we were still talking about what these things were. So it's been a really intense experience of, and I have to say also, sorry I'll come back to that, but the group of people that came together in some magical way, like sometimes happens in theatre, are the most extraordinary, wonderful group of people. A lot of us have never met each other. We've only ever seen each other on Zooms, and just every single day, the minute you dip, somebody's there to pick you up. And I know that sounds sentimental, but actually, in terms of mental health and where we've all been and what we've all experienced, and we're the lucky ones because we're now part of the conversation, or beginning to be part of the conversation, and trying to be, that is our aim, to be more a part of the conversation in order to speak for the freelancers who are not. But the group is so brilliant at just supporting itself, and supporting each other. So we launched this website with 3 aims, 3 actions. One was, and you may have seen it if you're a freelance, anything, was a photo campaign on Instagram and Twitter, which was to just write freelance designer, freelance actor, freelance whatever, and hold your sign up with the hashtag of the website. to be a visible presence. And that one thing alone has meant so much to so many people who felt engaged in their world for the first time in 3 months. Just a simple thing like that, that suddenly makes people feel like they're all in it together and not isolated. And not. The second thing was to write to your MP, because it's probably the most important thing, and to keep writing and to keep the dialogue going with your MP. So there's a template letter on the website and it's not too late. I don't think it'll ever be too late to send it, explaining exactly why theatre matters and what it brings to, the economy. I mean, because that's what the government understands, is numbers, really. So we wrote an open letter in the same vein to the heads of, the ministers, the relevant ministers. And the third thing was to fill in a form and join us on our website, which is just freelancersmaketheatrework.com. And either just join us and get our newsletters and access the website and, but also to feed back slightly in whatever way. And I've been in charge. I mean, also none of us have I have no skills beyond the skills that I use every day. So, monitoring a website email box every day and reading everybody's emails and filing them and, collating them into, subjects for talking about is a new skill for me. But it's meant that I've seen all the concerns that people have had, and not everybody's done it, but there've been some really amazing and heartbreaking and responses and some great ideas. And so that's the third part of it. But then since we started, which was only 2 weeks ago, we linked up with Curtain Call, which is well, I want to say, I mean, they're formed. Well, Matt Humphries is a theatre photographer and has published books of theatre photographs for a long time, but his company also does surveys, and they put together this survey very quickly, and very basic anonymous survey, took 5 minutes to fill in, and we had to get it up and running and out to to anybody who was interested on Twitter, on Instagram. We broke Instagram, so we were banned from Instagram for a week because our picture campaign had been so successful. So that was a bit of a disaster, but we're back up. But the survey was some really basic questions about how have you been affected? What have you earned? Have you earned anything? Were you eligible for any of these grants? And then the last two questions were about how you're doing and anything else you'd like to say. And I spent most of Sunday going through 1,000 of those. We had 8,000 responses in a week, which is unheard of. There is no survey, there is no document that has anywhere close to that amount of information about theatre practitioners anywhere. There has never been. I think the most up until now was a survey commissioned by SALT some years ago that got 2,000 responses. We had 8,000 in a week, and apparently, I don't know what the sum takeaway from all of that is. I think it's going to take a while to collate and make some understandings from, but having read 1,000 of those last two questions on Sunday, it's really fascinating to see, and we can talk about this anon, I think, about just simple things like Alex was saying, what do you want? Overwhelmingly, again and again and again, people just write hope and sometimes a hug. And I think it is as simple as that, to feel like you're involved again in an industry that is all consuming, that takes up so much of your time, that pays you so badly generally, and yet you still love it and want to do it and are just sitting at home waiting to hear about it. So in a sense, that's why we came together, is to try and connect those dots, to to be a conduit for freelancers through us to talk to theatre buildings, producers, producing companies, and ongoing. So again, this is, you know, as you said, Philippa, earlier, the news is changing on a daily basis. Three theatres in the last week have announced that they are sacking or making redundant at least 50% of their staff. And that's because there is no solid information to go on. So they have no choice. They can't plan for something they don't know is going to happen. So there's that, and then there's been a whole, in these emails, a whole kind of world of suggestions about how we go back and how we work better and how it all works better, which is a really massive project in itself. But getting back would be a start. I think I've said enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. And I mean, what you describe actually is reminiscent of so many of the networks that have sprung up during this period of time. You know, people who are working really hard to pursue the aims of their members. I wanted to give a bit of a shout out to Excluded UK, who've been doing absolutely fantastic work in terms of lobbying around you know, where people are falling through the gaps. I mean, so tenacious, unbelievable. And also there are lots of people putting useful links into the Q&A, so into the chat, so do have a look in there, including 6 Feet from the Spotlight. Hi to you guys, glad you could join us. So there are lots of groups that people can join, resources that people can access. Alex has put some links in there too, so please do make use of all of those. And the one thing that I would say is, I think I've said it before, Alex has certainly heard me say it before, is one of the really positive things I think that's come out of this crisis is the way that so many of us across the industry have collaborated to try and make change happen, firstly to try and financially support people, but also to make change happen within the industry, both in terms of not just looking after people's physical health as they return to work, but also perhaps more importantly, their mental health, or as importantly, their mental health as they return to work. You know, we're absolutely determined that this is a time that we can, you know, we've got leverage and we can make some change in the industry in all sorts of ways, including, you know, addressing the racism that is you know, everywhere within the creative industries. And we're, you know, working with others, we're determined that actually this isn't going to be about talk this time, but that we're going to make sure that the broadcasters, the film producers, the theatres put actions behind their good words going forward. So at that point, I think I'll ask Adeel to make a contribution. Thanks, Adeel.
Hi, everyone. Obviously, Alex and Peter have just spoken wonderfully about you know, what they're doing. I think I'll just sort of back up a lot of that with just some personal experiences and stories and what the TV Mindset does. So for those of you who don't know, the TV Mindset is something that I set up sort of last year and then officially beginning of this year, as a sort of peer support place for freelancers in particular who work in TV. And it was inspired by my own experiences of leaving the television industry and just sort of feeling at that point that there wasn't enough support or being able to just even talk about my diagnosis of borderline personality disorder. And I'm sure, as a lot of you can relate, you know, there's still very much a culture of fear and, you know, just around being a freelancer. You know, do I talk about my mental health because, you know, will an employer see that? Will someone pass that on? Will I be seen as a liability? You know, should I just be hyper perfect all the time to make sure that, you know, I can just pay my bills essentially? And what we've noticed obviously during this crisis is just a huge surge in our membership, because people are looking, as Peter rightly said, they're looking for hope, they're looking for support. And you know, we are lucky that we're able to offer that, you know, with a series of webinars that we've done, whether it's to do with financial support, general well-being, addressing the issues of racism that are very, very, very prevalent in our industry. And it is very clear that, you know, whether it's you're a white freelancer or, you know, a member of a minority within the community, I think that it's very much the case that between the actions of industry bodies and also our government, there is very much a feeling that we don't matter. And I think that is a thing that's really hit people, the contribution that we make either to our industry or financially through taxes. I think the overarching feeling is, you know, the bits of support that aren't available to us, you know, we struggle with self-worth so much, and now it almost feels legitimized, and that's really difficult to deal with on top of everything that we go through as it is. All the sort of the politics and the you know, the mental minefield that we deal with, the anxiety of finding another job, all of that it just has really compounded that. And I think it's really laid all of our industries, certainly the creative industries, it's really laid bare how problematic they are and how we really need to find some sort of way forward that doesn't take us back to the status quo. Because as Alex and the Film and TV Charities Looking Glass survey said, you know, it is a crisis. There's, you know, 86% of people who suffered ill mental health compared to 6% of the national average. And Alex is right, crisis is probably not the right word. I think, if I'm being honest, we are on the verge of a mental health emergency, and that is untenable, like absolutely untenable. People will leave the industry, especially people from minority backgrounds. People won't be able to get into the industry, especially people from minority backgrounds and people with access issues. It is a terrifying place to be. And, you know, those of us with privilege, you know, I'm lucky to have been in the industry for you know, almost 12 years. It is our duty, either whether it's as peer support or the organisations that we work in, whether you're staff or freelance or a charity or a union, you know, this is obviously our time to step up and remind people. And I'm so glad to be on this panel this morning, because it is to remind all of you, you know, who are here and people who'll be watching afterwards, that we are here and we're working really hard, and, you know, you shouldn't lose hope. And we obviously will all do whatever we can to make sure that this industry is happier, healthier and fairer going forward. I was speaking to somebody a while back, and I think, you know, obviously the crisis is horrendous, both, you know, not just for our industry, but honestly, just look around physical health and the you know, the numbers of lives lost over the last few months. You know, we've got that to deal with as well as worrying about our livelihood. But in terms of this industry, you know, resetting to zero often allows us to rebuild something in the way that we want it to, you know, to look like. And I think that is the real chance here. And I'm so grateful to people like Alex for, you know, for example, the support funds that the Film and TV Charity have released, the support line, Big White Wall, and also, if you haven't seen it, Alex's statement this week on racism in the industry and the measures that are being taken. Philippa and I have been talking a lot. Obviously, Bectu have been delivering some great webinars, but also, you know, we're setting up the unscripted branch of Bectu to help those who felt, you know, that they haven't had support, certain, you know, for various different reasons. And it feels like people are listening. And this is what we need. We need, you know, I genuinely believe that we are in this position because, look, the industry isn't a happy place. I don't think anyone could, you know, any broadcaster, any big, you know, industry body can look at what's going on even before this crisis and say this industry overall is a happy place. The stats just don't back it up. The Looking Glass survey doesn't back it up. And I believe that we are here because down the line, in various different ways, all of our institutions have failed us. And that is what I think there's a great degree of introspection that needs to be done. And for every single stakeholder in this industry to realize that their largest stakeholder, arguably the freelancers, is in pain. And we need to do everything we can to protect that talent, to nurture it, and to make sure that we move forward with a much happier and healthier industry. And like I say, you know, the TV Mindset is a very, very, very small part of that. You know, it's just sort of a one-man band in my bedroom, but at the same time, you know, we're just doing whatever we can to make sure that people feel supported, and to support the work of, you know, institutions like Bectu and the Film and TV Charity and any other, you know, institutions that we can work with to make sure that message is being reached, but also to just campaign and keep the human side of this at the heart of it. That's, you know, I mean that, and obviously, as Alex has said as well, all of this stuff has been compounded recently with the Black Lives Matter movement, and it's so important not to forget, you know, the intersections, the people, you know, the marginalised people within our groups, the people who will have a lot more difficulty both getting back to work or starting to access it to begin with. So it's a real chance to step back and look at the bigger picture and see where we all fit in and what we can bring to the table. But yeah, just to sort of end on a message of hope, I am really pleased to say that, you know, certainly the people on this webinar are doing that, and we are probably not going to rest, knowing just hearing everyone speak, we're probably not going to rest or sleep until we drag everyone to this table and make sure something is done.
Thank you very much, Adeel. I absolutely concur with everything you say, as do lots of people on the chat. So, I mean, I think it will be good to perhaps reflect a little bit on what we want to see going forward, what practical steps might make the situation better going forward. And I know that lots of us have been involved in conversations about what needs to change. What can we do going forward that gives all of those people who've been traumatized by finding out that they are, you know, they haven't been eligible for government support, but not just that, but also have to deal with the stresses and strains of a freelance work style anyway. What conversations need to take place? How do we put pressure on broadcasters and theatres to make sure that people do have more control over their working lives going forward? We've been talking to lots of Bectu members about this situation, what a new deal for freelancers might look like. But we've also been involved in conversations with the Creative Industries Federation about what needs to change within the industry to give freelancers a little bit more support, certainty, a few more rights, I guess, at work that many employees enjoy currently. So, Alex, I don't know if you wanted to talk a bit about your Forward programme and the work that the charity is planning going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, at risk of echoing what others have already said, there is an opportunity. There's a hashtag going around on Twitter, Build Back Better. I think there is an opportunity to build back better. And, you know, incredibly painful though this period has been, it has exposed in an undeniable way how precarious, difficult and fragile working in our industry can be. And that is known and understood in a way that it's never been before. And that that is understood at the highest echelons of the industry. So I think we should all take some hope and optimism from that. I do think, I can see this being said in the chat as well, to build back better, to sort of seize that opportunity to improve the industry, is going to take some real diligence and hard work. It's not just going to happen. It's going to require a lot of commitment over a long period of time. These aren't things you solve with a magic wand. A lot of this is deeply structural in the way our industry works. We're heavily, we're almost entirely reliant on freelancers, and that's the way it works. And that's what's brilliant about our industry. And a lot of people love freelancing and the flexibility it gives them. But, there can be huge downsides and difficulties that come with that as well. I think we all, and what the industry at large now understands is that we need that workforce, that freelance workforce, to be resilient and sustainable, and resilient financially, because actually you can't pull away someone's livelihood for months and expect them to still be there when you're trying to rebuild the industry on the other end of it. And we will all know stories of people who've already left to go and do other things, and that's a real problem for the industry. And we need people to be mentally resilient and be able to sorry, I'm saying that in a way that sounds as though it's the responsibility of the individual. It's not. It's about how the industry works to ensure that that workforce, you know, the people working within the industry are the best that they can be. And actually there's, you know, the interesting thing is there's a business imperative behind that as well. That's not just, you know, the industry doing the right thing. That's that, you know, we all need our people to be happy, healthy, creative and productive in order to make brilliant content and do brilliant things within the industry. In terms of what we're doing with the Whole Picture programme, which is our programme of work around mental health, it's a 2-year programme that will run through to the autumn of 2022. And there are a number of outputs from that. We've got, you know, wide support and buy-in from industry institutions and the big corporates across the industry for this already, which is really encouraging. There's an element which is about what we're calling people-centered production. So, you know, we've spoken about the fact that, you know, particularly lack of control over working hours is a really big determinant of poor mental health. Interestingly, we found in the research it wasn't working hours per se, it's the control you have over those working hours, and it's being unable to, you know, pick your child up from school or meet your friends after work or have the family dinner. It's those things that impact on mental health. And we think there are a number of things that can be done there to make sure that that TV and film production is operating in a way that really does put its people at the heart of what it's doing. I can see Leo Thomas and Matt Longley on the chat as well, and you know, they've done a great job of championing the idea of there being, you know, dedicated mental health support on set. Also, we think there's a strand of work around bullying and how to combat bullying and how to really ensure that they're a place. I mean, you know, one of the endemic problems of the industry has been that where there is a lot of informality of recruitment and no structure for reporting bad behaviour, these things go unsaid, and kind of, you know, everyone knows it, but there's no way of that behaviour being stopped. So there are some really practical things that can be done there. I think there is greater enforcement of some of the guidelines that are already in place that can be implemented. There is, you know, we're looking at things like having a bullying advisor. It's something the NHS have done through some of their support services. So someone you can talk to if you're experiencing bullying, can literally, you know, perhaps coach you or let you rehearse what you want to say to that person the next time you see them, which can be very empowering. And then there's some bigger ideas about reporting systems, which are not simple to implement, but could be really transformative. Alongside that, we do think there's some behaviour change work that's needed. And, you know, again, this has been done in other sectors, and we've looked at examples from construction. It's really interesting. You know, sort of very stereotypically macho, you know, high degree of stigma around mental health. So, you know, what lessons can, and they've actually done a great job. They created a new charity called Mates in Mind to support in response to high levels of suicide within the construction sector. So what lessons can we learn? I mean, strangely, you know, for a sector that is supposed to be about empathy and storytelling, we have we breed a lot of machoism and a lot of inhibition about talking about our vulnerabilities and how we're feeling and how we're doing. So how can we lift some of that? Better training for people skills. You know, we're very good at promoting on technical skills, and we're very poor, I believe, at promoting based on people skills. So, you know, people management is a bit of an anathema, particularly on production. I mean, you ask questions about, you know, speaking to your line manager if there is an incident. I think most people on a production set wouldn't even know who their line manager was, and certainly wouldn't go and talk to them about what was going on. So how we really embed those people skills within the workforce, and then about how we can, you know, enhance, improve the support that we as a charity can give to people with all of this. So it's, you know, there's a lot of ambitious things there, but I hope that there is, you know, a readiness, you know, timing is everything, a readiness and appetite at the current time to be able to to really sort of get to grips with some of those issues.
Can I just add, Philippa, but really quickly? I think, obviously, I'm just such a huge fan of Alex's plans. And I think, as quite rightly said, there's going to be a lot of foundation work, to be put in and a lot of conversations to have. And it, it's not going to happen overnight. But what I can say in the meantime is, peer support in different ways can help. And I think, for example, we are going into the same issues in terms of finding work, and also there is going to be that usual chat about rates, and is that person going to take higher than me, or should I just take this lower rate? It's potentially exploitative to do that. And I genuinely believe, like I've seen through all of our groups, that the freelancers have so much power when we come together, and we have to stand together. We have to support each other. We shouldn't undercut each other. This is our industry. And obviously one of the best ways to do that is, of course, through a union, but still, talk to each other. And just make sure that when we go forward, we are going forward as a unit.
Thank you, Adeel and Alex. Did you want to say anything at this point, Peter?
I mean, just to agree with what Adeel just said, actually, in terms of, I just keep thinking, when I was describing, after 11 weeks, nobody had a conversation, what it turned out, or it seems to me anyway, that almost no theatre had any conversation at all about freelancers, at all. They've been talking about their buildings, they've been talking about their staff, and inevitably saving what they could see. But in theatre, freelancers are 70% of the workforce and make, I don't know, I'm making a statistic up here, but most of what you see on stage is made by freelancers. The product is made by freelancers. So even if you save your building and your staff, you've got to have something to put in it. Without freelancers, there is no theatre. So in theatre, which is a much more hokey, I think, world than, or appears to be anyway, I don't know much about film and television, but a hokey world, that in answer to your first question about what we see going forward, I mean, at the moment for freelancers, I think it's really, really difficult, because the majority of freelance workers in theatre, before you get into rehearsal room, work in very small groups and sometimes alone. So it's a lonely, even what I do, 50% of what I do is sort of virtually on my own. And so knowing that might go on till the end of the year or beyond that is, everything that Alex and Adeel have said is, so many people in these responses in the surveys are saying, oh, I might as well just give up, or I might do this, or I might do that. And you think, so getting beyond that is going to be such a massive thing. And getting producers and production companies and theatres, and there are two different things in theatre. There's the commercial sector and there's the subsidised sector. It's radically different things. Trying to get the commercial world to understand that that it has a responsibility to the people that work for it. And it's so easy to just kind of go, well, we won't use you then, we'll use somebody else. And that pattern has to be seen to change. And I think we, as Adeel was saying, we can only really do that as a group of, there's a really good, in this time, group called Scene Change for theatre designers of all sorts, to come together. And that's been a really, it's been a really wonderful kind of focusing place, safe place, actually, supportive place, for really good for people's mental health, people who aren't working, people who are, students coming out of college. Absolutely heartbreaking. Not only do you not get your final year show and your whatever, but you're stepping into a world of a massive unknown. So I think I agree, all of the things we've all talked about need to happen, but I think we need to get to a place where it's possible to have those conversations first.
I absolutely agree with all of that, and I certainly agree with what Alex said about making real and sustainable change is going to take an awful lot of work from all of us who are interested in making the industry a better place to work, because we already know that employers and engagers are going to be facing their own financial challenges. The broadcasters, the BBC is being squeezed, the advertising is being squeezed for ITV and Channel 4. Indies, are going to struggle more than the big film producers, sure, and theatres no doubt will have the same argument. But what we must, all of us collectively, and I agree, it will take a collective effort. What we need to do is make sure that we are all saying that the sorts of behaviours that are being described are not acceptable. Employees wouldn't accept them. Why should freelancers accept them? And actually, we want to have we want freelancers to have more control over their working lives and to be able to not be bullied at work. I absolutely agree with Alex that bullying is huge in the film and TV charity. In the film and TV industry, we know that just purely by the amount of interest that we have in our blocking bullying behaviours seminars, and people who come to us and talk about what they are experiencing at work. So there is just so much that needs to be addressed, and it will take all of us, I think, and it will take a real concerted effort to make sure that actually it should be a fantastic place to work, shouldn't it? It should be exciting, it should be exhilarating, but actually I agree with what Adeel said, that at the moment people are feeling very unhappy in the industry with the way that they've been treated, not just through this period, but actually this period has probably caused them to reflect on how they've been treated over many years. And we want to see a vibrant industry with lots of young and diverse people coming through and having a good experience, and not the sorts of experiences that we've all heard about and have been very traumatic for lots of people. So I'm going to start talk. Oh, I should have mentioned at the beginning, actually, I should have mentioned that I think broadcast are listening in. So welcome to Max if you're there. Hopefully he'll be writing a story about some of the things that we've talked about today. Still more resources going into the chat, I noticed, and I was just going to ask Naomi and Bectu Comms. I was just going to put the numbers up in the chat for the theatre helpline, the film and TV charity helpline, and also the Samaritan. So if you wouldn't mind doing that, Naomi, and I'll go to the Q&A. We don't seem to have lots of questions, but let's see what we've got.
Philippa, there's a question coming up in the chat about Black mental health, particularly at the moment, which I think is worth us discussing.
Sure.
If I can, if I'm allowed to.
Yeah, please do.
The chairing responsibility, because I only touched on it ever so briefly right at the beginning. I think we talk about this accumulation of factors of what's going on at the moment, and the fact that we're both in the middle of a pandemic and kind of the devastation of the industry whilst the Black Lives Matter movement is going on will have very acute and specific impacts for Black people working within the industry and other ethnic minority people working within the industry, and we recognise that. I think, and Adeel may want to join in here, that there is actually appallingly little known about Black and ethnic minority mental health generally across the UK. If you go away and research it, there is not a great deal of national data that is broken down by race. But it's very clear that racism in all its forms, a lot of which is incredibly insidious. It's not, the outright slurs, and what I can see Nana talking about in the chat, it can be the isolation, it can be the marginalisation. The biggest impact of that on a day-to-day basis is poor mental health outcomes, and that was shown in the Racism Ruins Lives reports that the TUC published last year or the year before. So, and then obviously that's all been added to by recent events. I mean, everything the charity does is available for everyone, and we want to make that very clear, and those services are there, but we are also looking at what more specific support is needed for our Black community at the current time. So I'm really happy to, I expect Adeel will want to add to that. I'm really happy to engage in sort of further conversations about, and if there are suggestions of what specifically and particularly we can do to support people, then I'd really love to hear from you.
Yeah, just to echo what Alex said. Firstly, I've put the link to the film and TV charity statement about racism in TV, and also the commitments that they've put forward. And I have to, it's full credit to Alex and her team to, we've had some conversations over the last couple of weeks, and just to feel like we've been listened to and that these measures have been put forward, I think is a really, really positive step. Obviously, we know that systemic racism can't be solved overnight, but I think it is just to remind all of us that, even there are people falling through the cracks, even within those the initial cracks. That's the truth of it, and those are the intersections. The people who are essentially having to prove to themselves and the world around them that we deserve to be here. And that is such a difficult thing for your mental health, and it's something that you live with. It's something you go to work with. The last thing you want when you go to work is to then be made to feel like that even more. Work should be your safe place. Work should, it should be fun, especially as Philippa said, this is what we enjoy doing. We did our webinar on racism in TV, and we heard directly from young Black women who shared their stories, and it's heartbreaking. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And again, I do feel that, going forward, our industry is going to be richer because of its diversity. And if we lose that, then it is just going to be an absolute, it's just going to be such a tragedy for us all.
Yeah, is that webinar still available, Adeel?
Yeah, you can find that webinar on our Facebook and Twitter pages. I will try and drop a link into the chat box as well now.
I would recommend that people watch that, because it was really affecting and brilliant to hear from people who were being, very open and brave about their experiences in the industry. And also Bectu, we also ran a webinar last week on the subject of discrimination in TV and film industry, which I think also hopefully the link is available and you can watch it. Everyone can watch it. And during that webinar, we launched our Black Bectu network too. So we're I'll get Naomi again to put the link to that in so many links. Somebody's just said there's so many links in this webinar. Can they have details of them afterwards? And yes, we will share the chats to people who've signed up. So yeah, we're the idea of our network actually is that we hear from more Black and Asian voices across the industry, and that we're able to have a network of people who can support each other and push us, let's face it, to be better on the subject, and make sure that we're pushing broadcasters and producers, film producers, to do better too. So please do join that if you feel inclined to. So I'm going to have a quick look. So somebody's asking, I think you did post already a link to the Freelancers Make Theatres Work. Will there be a transcript of this meeting? So I think we're going to share the link for this meeting so people can watch again, and hopefully we'll share the chat and all of the useful links that people have shared. Somebody saying, I have dyslexia. I am a producer and head of productions. I'm a mental health first aider. I'm here to make change. I'm trained in all mental health. I'm trained in leadership. Stop bullying. Need diversity, inclusion, LGBT. TV mindset is great. Absolutely, TV mindset is great. So thank you for that. Somebody's saying, thank you to Peter. As a person with a disability, I'm not always able to find links in audio. how seriously are production companies about tackling mental health issues in the workplace? Has there been commitment from any of the production companies or broadcasters to implement changes? I guess that's quite a good question for you, Alex. Not putting you on the spot too much or anything.
Well, obviously I can't speak on their behalf. What I can say is that all of the big broadcasters, BBC Studios, ITV, Channel 4, Viacom, Sky, plus Endemol Shine as one of the biggest TV production companies, are signed up to our task force on mental health. That means they are funding it as well. So they are, putting their money where their mouth is. They are funding the work that will be happening. As important as that is the leadership that they will show, as things stand, I believe they do see the case for change. We've got a lot of work. We've got a lot of work ahead of us. But the whole, the principle of this work we're undertaking is that it's industry wide and it's industry led. And what we're doing as a charity is just trying to facilitate that. It doesn't work if we're the ones delivering it all. We need them to be delivering on the promises that they're making. So, I think, I hope we make progress by being an optimist. I'm going to be an optimist and say, I really do believe there's an appetite for change there. I think new leadership coming through really does understand, mental health in a way that probably hasn't in previous generations of leadership of those organisations. So I do believe that they are committed. What I don't want to pretend is that there's any simple solution to issues which is sort of really deeply woven into the structure of the way the industry works. So there is no magic wand that we or they can wave. I think the work we do over the next 2 years is really only going to be making a start. And in some ways we may see, you often get reporting effects. As you lift some of the stigma around mental health, people will talk about it more, and it may look as though things are getting worse actually before they get better. And that's quite common when people start to talk about mental health more. So we all need to be in this for the long haul. And when we've talked about this work, we've talked about the 2-year plan transitioning into a 10-year strategy. And those are the timeframes you need to, I don't mean that to be dispiriting, I just think that's realistic about what's going to need to be done over a long period of time.
There's, I just want to share a couple of small wins that we've had just through campaigning, because I do believe that the longer term change and sort of the cultural change is going to take a while, but there are things that companies have been doing and offering that certainly help in the short term. One obviously is mental health first aid and just more acute awareness and training around that area. Particularly my current employer, STV, have been brilliant in terms of just listening and responding, and we're sort of piloting an initiative there thanks to the help of the HR team and occupational health, which is, we talk a lot about aftercare for contributors on screen, which is quite rightly there in place, but what people don't realise is that often people behind the screen do go through similar, if not, obviously not to the same extent, they're not in the spotlight, but certainly the trauma and bullying, or all of that stuff is still rife on a production, and then suddenly you lose your contract and you're discarded, you're just sort of released to the wild, watching daytime TV, sort of wondering what the hell to do, and then you haven't really processed what's happened to you, and then you're already looking for your next job. So we had a chat, and I put forward this idea of offering occupational health. Obviously STV is a broadcast and a production company, but offering occupational health support for up to 4 or 5 weeks after the contract is done, so that if you feel that there's something that's happened on that production that you want to talk to, because as great as the film and TV charity are great, but ultimately they are a charity with limited resources, and I do believe that broadcasters should also take responsibility for the things that are happening in their own houses. So there's small wins that are that can happen, and things that that companies can do, if not while Alex and her team, that their work is in progress, we can still try and make things a little bit easier in the interim. And I will say, just to sort of echo some things in the chat as well about what we're doing, I will say that this is all due to voices being heard. And again, there's that nature of fear, isn't it? But, you know, if we don't speak up, and now is our chance to speak up, but you know, all of this has come from conversation. And if there's anything you do take from this, it is, you know, I hope that you feel a little bit empowered to realise that raising your voice can make a difference. Obviously, you know, there are certain ways to do it, certain hoops to jump through, but ultimately, you know, we are in that position at the moment where we do also have to help ourselves a little bit more, and maybe, you know, join hands to move things forward.
Absolutely. I agree with all of that. So there's a question here: are there any groups for disabled freelancers working in theatre? I don't know if you know the answer. I can't think of.
Well, there's we had a really lovely man called Andrew Miller, who, and I'm going to get this right, he's the first disability arts champion for the government. So, and he's got a campaign called, so he works with the UK Disability Arts Alliance, and he's got a campaign called #WeShallNotBeRemoved, to bringing awareness to disability arts. And I urge whoever's asked the question to look that up, because he was just so brilliant and gentle and articulate about the very simple and obvious needs. He came to talk to us to kind of go, well, when you're thinking about the future, think about these things. Think about the fact that 12% of people who go to the theatre have a disability. Think about the fact that 33% of all people who've died of COVID have some sort of disability. I mean, just sort of things that we don't have on our register, things that are very simple to remember. And I just thought, goodness, you're such a brilliant advocate for disability arts. So I think that's a good place to start. And on our website, there's, I'm just looking at where that is. It's in advocating bodies. There's Disability Arts Online and Grey Eye. I mean, and then if you find anything, let us know, because we will put anything and everything on the website. That's what we're there for. And as I say, we you know, striving every day and every week to get better representation within our group to champion that.
Thank you, and thanks to Mig, who's putting some links on the chat as well, and also saying, is this guy Andrew Miller is talking at the ABTT Diversity Seminar this afternoon at 2 p.m. apparently.
Well worth it, I'd say.
And Philippa, I'd just like to point out, we're announcing it on Monday, but TV Mindset, this is specifically obviously for TV. We are doing a webinar on disability in TV and how to improve access. So that will be panelists such as Julie Shaw, who's a commissioning editor for the BBC, and also the actor David Proud, who's been quite vocal on Twitter this week about disability issues. So we're announcing that formally on Monday, but that will be on the 13th of July, Monday the 13th at 2 p.m. So if you'd like to attend that, just mark that down, and more details will be available on TV Mindset.
Brilliant, and we'll share that as well if that's okay, Adeel, at some point. Good. So much brilliant stuff going on during this period. So someone's saying, who's anonymous, it's great that entry level is being addressed, but mid-career progression is really difficult, especially expensive training courses, and I'm not eligible for any financial help. Does the panel think this will change? Alex?
I'm not sure if that's a question about progression, about diversity progression or progression more generally. I do think there's a really important point at the moment, and access to our industry and widening access to our industry is crucial. I think we can all take that as a read, but we do have to recognise that we've got brilliant people already within the industry who are not being sufficiently supported to progress all the way through it, and that may be people from diverse backgrounds and not. And one of my greatest fears is that we are going to lose those people during the current crisis, because, this is, if you like, kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. They've experienced this for months and years. They're not getting the financial support that they that they should be getting, they're not getting the, the opportunities aren't being open to them in the way that they should be. And we've already seen how bad the pre-existing mental health of people working within the industry was. They're just going to sort of put their hands up and go, I've had enough, I'm off. So some of the work that we, and I'm sure you as well, Philippa, are doing with government now and industry is about making sure we really focus on the making the most of the people we've already got and not losing them, because I think that could send us, personally, one of my great fears at the moment is that we will go backwards on diversity for that reason. We'll lose the good people that we've already got within the industry who are not being adequately supported. And so I think we, as we come out of this crisis, that needs to be our first priority, the people that are here already, making sure that they are supported and enabled now and in the future, whilst also obviously looking at the future talent pipeline that comes up through the access scheme. So that would be my view.
I think as well, people, we know specifically for employers, I would say, with everything that's happening now, whether it is a diversity initiative or, whatever we're doing to get people back to work, is, what we've realised is the quick fixes aren't always 100% effective. We've got to look at strategy. That is the key word that I keep coming back to, whether it's diversity or just long-term thing. It's effectively like, putting a plaster on when surgery is needed. Like, you've got to look at the long game here and look at not only what you're doing, and that includes obviously career progression as well. It's like not what you're just doing to get people in, but how you're keeping them there, and whether that's to do with culture or pay or, mentorship or training, all of that stuff. You've just got to look at everything when you do these things.
I absolutely agree with that. I think there are some real serious structural changes that need to be made to ensure that that the industry is inclusive, but also that we address some of these structural problems. Absolutely. Lots more questions coming in now. Good. If I can see them anyway, it's good. Thank you for this. I work in production and I'm anxious about getting back in the office, even though lockdown rules have been relaxed. I still don't feel comfortable travelling to the office. Any advice on how to tackle this? I think this is a real challenge, isn't it, for people? I mean, there are clearly, wherever people work, there are huge concerns and anxieties around returning to work, getting on public transport, going into their places of work, and some people will deal with that better than others. But I think for many it is going to be a really anxious time.
I mean, if I can come in on that, Philippa.
Yeah, okay.
I'm sure, we have this conversation with our own team, and I'm sure you have it with your team. I mean, any good employer should be consulting with you on your situation and what's going on. And, even with our own team within the charity, I'm incredibly conscious there are people in wildly different personal situations. There are people in shared flat where there's 4 of you kind of fighting for Wi-Fi around the kitchen table, and you're desperate to get back into the office, and there will be people who are living with elderly relatives who will be understandably very anxious about exposing them to the possibility of the virus. So certainly what we're doing internally, and as I say, I hope any good employer will be doing, is allowing for a great deal of flexibility and a very gradual approach and return to work that takes account of different people's situations. And I think if you feel you're not getting that from your employer, go and have a conversation with them.
Absolutely, yes, and I agree. Yes, we are doing the same, and it has to be very gradual, and it has to be done in a supportive way, and not thou shalt, but actually trying to understand the individuals' circumstances and their anxieties that they have. What can we do as individuals to encourage this in our workplace? I know a number of freelancers who've undertaken mental health first aid training as a starting point. Anyone want to jump in on that one?
I mean, I'll say something, and Peter and Adeel may want to add. I mean, there's still an enormous amount of stigma around mental health, generally in society, but specifically within our industry. In the survey we did last year, we asked people if they'd speak to their line manager about their mental health, and only 7% said they would. Within freelancers, that was 2%. So, and again, freelancers may say, who even is my line manager? So it does feel as though there's this kind of veil of silence over the topic of mental health. And so my encouragement would be to improve your own awareness. If there are things you can do for yourself, that's great, but talk about it, and find some easy routes in to talk about mental health so that others around you feel that they can talk about their mental health as well.
I think that, yeah, just echo what Alex was saying. I think, even TV Mindset was started by me sharing my own story and leaving the industry and coming back, and the way that it just does make everyone feel quite comfortable around you in order to talk about it. And I think when it comes to line management as well, when you start a job, I think it is quite important, especially as there is so much visibility now, thanks to people like Alex. That mental health in TV is a problem, and it can be talked about. For example, there was a junior member of staff who's freelance, who joined production and needed to go to therapy once a week. And I've been, afraid to ask for that myself, because I think, oh my God, I've got my contract, I have to be there every hour of every day, but also this is important. And I didn't do that, and I had a breakdown. So, she put that forward, and the company worked around her schedule. And I think, again, even though things are quite tough, there is a lot to be said for advocating for yourself as well. Because the other thing that I would say, as now with my line manager and producer hat on, is that when you walk into the office, especially someone I've not worked with before, I probably don't know until you tell me. So I can only do something about it if you tell me what you're going through, or what you're experiencing, or what your needs are. Otherwise, I'll just assume that, everything's fine. So I would encourage, and I would probably, as a manager, encourage that communication to begin with. There was a practice that I heard for one production where they gathered everyone around at their production meeting and said, we're not going to be one of those companies that doesn't let you go off for an appointment, or if you've got any trouble, so just come and talk to us. And you can either do that individually or as a group, but at least it opens that door. And I think more companies and more managers would do well to start doing that.
I have very little to add, because this isn't my field of expertise, but I could speak as a freelancer to say I wouldn't dream of talking about my mental health. To Alex's point about, or was it Adeel's point about 2% of freelancers, and I've never really encountered it. I mean, I think theatre is so far behind in terms of, as we've seen, just in terms of acknowledging that freelancers are anything more than, I don't want to say dispensable, that's ungrateful, and it's not what I mean, but the buildings and the people who work in them come first, and I'm sure they all have policies, but they just, an awful lot of things don't seem to extend to freelancers, which again is what we're here for. But it would be enlightening to know that, especially now, and nobody knows, even I, can't really tell after 11, 12, 13, 14 weeks at home, what not working for some of that time, having worked for most of my life, has really done to me. And when we all get back together, we are all expected to, I would imagine, by people who are employing us, to just get on with it like we did before, without taking into any account the fact that most of us haven't earned any money for, particularly in theatre, because we don't know when that's going back, and most of the government support is gone by August or October at the latest. So there will be a lot to contend with, and I think it's going to be a big issue, like you said earlier, a really big issue for theatre, much bigger than anybody knows.
Thank you. Did I disappear for a while there? I'm actually in the office today. That didn't work. That didn't happen when I was working from home. So someone's asking about online mental health training. I know that we've done some, but I can't think off the top of my head whether we've got more scheduled. But does anyone know of any other mental health first aid training? Perhaps put it in the chat if you do.
I'm going to, the best person at the Film and TV charity to talk about things like that is Lucy Talon, who's our head of mental health. I don't want to say the wrong thing, so I'm going to, and this is a bit unfair on Lucy when she's not even here, I'm going to put her email in the chat box, and then if people want to be able to ask those questions to her directly, she'll be the place to go.
And on that point as well, I just want to add something that I've learned over the last few months as well, is that please, employers and everyone that you go to, please do your research into the people that you are using. Just make sure that the qualifications that they have and it's verified. Mental health is a minefield, and there's a lot of regulation around it, particularly if somebody's advertising themselves as a psychotherapist. Obviously, therapy is not a small matter and requires a lot of training, a lot of sensitivity, and you're sharing a lot on there. So when you're, even as an employer, if you're bringing somebody in, just because they say mental health first aid, doesn't mean that they should just get in and they know everything. Do just please, for the safety of your freelancers and your staff, just do a bit of extra research. Doesn't take much time. Happy to do it as well if anyone needs. So yeah, I would strongly recommend doing that as well. And Lucy is bloody fantastic. I worked with her so much. She's one of my favourite people. So yeah, she'd definitely be able to help.
Yeah, I just sorry, if I can just second what Adeel is saying, because I think all mental health training is good. Anything that raises awareness of mental health is good, and we're supportive of that. But one of the challenges that I think a lot of people have encountered is that the standard formats aren't very well suited to the nature of work in our sector. So mental health first aiding, which is an accredited course by Mental Health First Aid England, is basically designed for office environments, which is kind of all right for us as a charity, but pretty hopeless if you're trying to train people in a production environment. And I know there are a number of people who've been looking at how they can adapt some of that accredited training to types that are more usable, specific, and practical for our industry. But it's, we're not all the way there yet. And I do know training, someone's gone in, he's the he's a series producer on 24 Hours in A&E. He's gone into a mental health training session, understandably wanting to know how he can support his team. And actually, that's not what the trainer hasn't been able to help with that kind of really practical support. So anything's good, but whether it's going to go as far as you need it to go, I think Adeel's right. You've got to look quite carefully at what you're using.
And can I just shout out again, 6 Feet From, they've put lots of links to their training in the chat, so have a look at that too. Maybe our final question, because we're nearly at 11:30. Time really does fly when you're having really good and useful conversations, I think. But Mig is saying the provision in the NHS for mental health support we all know is stretched. Is there any merit in investing and supporting a peer support structure, devised group sessions encouraging talking and making closer links to support one another during these times? I would love to see this happen in a more formal way. It sounds like a brilliant idea to me. I don't know what others think.
Yeah, it's really important that we can enable this. I mean, I think there is a community within the industry. Everyone who's watching this session is part of an industry community, and we are there to support one another. One thing I really want us as the charity to be able to do more of is to, find ways to enable that community to come together, to make it feel much more like you're part of that community than perhaps it has felt historically. The Big White Wall service that I talked about, and I posted in the chat further up, is a form of that. It's not perfect because it's not terribly industry specific. It was something we wanted to roll out quite quickly because of COVID. But yes, in the future, finding ways both digitally online but also in real life that people can make those connections and establish that peer support, which has kind of happened naturally, I think, over the last couple of months anyway. But extending that and giving it a more sort of solid basis is something that we're absolutely looking at doing at the charity. I completely agree.
And I would say as well, and this is, thanks to the work that Bectu are doing as well, but, you know, we're all from sort of disparate, it's sort of traditionally viewed like, you know, theatre, film, TV, you know, music, all separate, but we are under the umbrella of creative industries. And there's so much that, you know, we can share from our experiences. For example, Peter, you were saying about, you know, theatre being far behind. You know, we're here to share our experiences to make every creative industry better. We all go through, there's a base level that we all go through and that we all experience. And if the things that we've been through and the things that we've learned can help you guys, I think that cross collaboration is so key. And we're, you know, I'm sure all of us here are willing to do that.
You know what I'm going to ask now, Adeel? I'm going to ask you to come and talk to us. So,
Done. I mean, I've said it. I'm like, yeah, you've got it.
Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, can I thank, as I say, we could probably have gone on for much longer. So this is not just one conversation. There'll be other conversations, continuing conversations about how we improve things within the industry, and not just conversations, but actually action to make things happen. But I really want to thank the panelists, Alex Pumfrey, Adeel Amini and Peter McKintosh. Thank you so much for your time and for your brilliant contributions. Thank you to Naomi from Bectu Comms, who's been supporting us in this webinar, and thank you so much to all of you who've dialed in and been coming up with brilliant ideas and links and suggestions. I really do appreciate that. It's been a fantastic session from my point of view, so thank you very much.
Thanks,
very
much,
guys.
Claire and everyone. Take care.